Wonderful. Welcome, 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 everybody. My name is Mike DeLuca. I am your host, and this is the Integrative Wellness and Development Podcast. And I am extremely excited that you're all here tonight. Going to welcome also our folks who are joining us on Zoom, because we just went live on Zoom and Facebook. And we're going to get started. A little bit about the podcast tonight. This podcast is totally and completely about Integrative Wellness and Development's interests in integrative wellness, integrative medicine, and a variety of personal and spiritual development topics. We have probably 2 episodes or more a month, and it's really my gift of love to the world. We don't have any sponsors. We don't have any employers. This is my insatiable appetite for learning and for sharing what I learn. We are not affiliated with any other organization. Our audience is made up of folks from all kinds of paths, philosophies, religions, backgrounds. It's a wonderful mixed group of folks who have come to explore and to share. And that's why we're here tonight. We have to also say that we do not make any claims that anything that you will hear on the show tonight is going to make you instant lottery winners or instant, spiritual masters, or going to enable you to diagnose, cure, or prevent any illnesses. I'm required by law to say all of that stuff. Your experiences are your unique experiences based on what you're going to hear tonight. But what we're going to talk about tonight is some really powerful things. So with that, I'm going to introduce our guest. I'm incredibly fortunate to have had our guest tonight, who is Doug Marman, and have had him on previous shows. He is very, very generous to share his time with us. And so, Doug, I want to welcome you to the show tonight. And what I want to do also is I would like to, if we would, just give a quick summary of who you are and what you are and where you are and why you are and all of that good stuff. And I will do that with this quick PowerPoint. So, here we are. This is our special guest, Doug Marman. And Doug's website is spiritualdialogues.com. If you've not been to that site and you've not explored some of Doug's many books and many discoveries, really invite you to go and do that. Tonight, the topic happens to be the title of one of Doug's great books, and that is The Silent Questions. So we're going to be talking about silent questions, but we're not going to be silent. So a little bit about Doug. Doug has been writing, lecturing, and leading classes on the exploration of consciousness for way over 40 years. He was the chief technology officer for a $1.7 billion division of GE. He was a founder of a technology startup involved with artificial intelligence. He's the holder of over 40 patents used in a variety of technologies. He's worked as a journalist, business unit manager, photographer, marketing manager, editor, publisher, etc., etc. Doug has authored 7 books whose titles include the ones you see here on the slide: The Hidden Teachings of Rumi, It Is What It Is, The Spiritual Flow of Life, Lenses of Perception, Sukhmani, The Silent Questions, and The Whole Truth and Nothing But the Truth. So with that, I'm going to get us back to seeing Doug, and there he is. Doug, welcome to our podcast, and thank you so much for being so generous with your time again to join me on the show.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I hope I can live up to my biography.
Oh, you already have. It's a piece of cake. who you are and what you are speaks for itself. But we would like for you to speak. So, so yeah. So this is a really a thought-provoking and inspiring title of a book, right? The Silent Questions. And first, I'd like to ask you, what led you to write a book with that title, and then what exactly are the silent questions?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it started for me when I had been studying what I'd say or exploring on the spiritual path for many years. And I had been keeping records of my experiences and in notebooks, a whole bunch of notebooks, lots of notebooks. And I decided it'd be nice to kind of combine them and go through them and pull them back and see if I could turn it into a book of some kind. And in the process, I began to get a much better idea of kind of what I was going through in my experiences. And I would have said, if in the beginning you were asking me what I was doing, I would have said, well, I'm trying to find answers, right? I'm looking for answers. But it was like, I'm looking. I thought I was the one who was looking, you know. But looking back over my record of my experiences and things, I could see it really was different than I expected. It was more like the questions were calling me, and that these started off as being, the kinds of questions I think everybody has. I call them silent because you don't usually talk about them much, but they come to you like, why am I here? What's the purpose of life? Or what, if you're getting older in life, you think, what exists after death? These are kind of questions that you don't just ask them because you're intellectually curious. There's some deep part of you that question coming from. And as I began to explore the spiritual sides of these questions, and through a series of experiences I had, I began to realize that it was not the answers I was looking for. The questions was the real thing that brought me on and moved me forward and kept me curious and kept me wanting to know more. And no matter where I got, there was always more questions. So the questions were there right from the beginning all the way, and still are. In that way, it really was something quite different. But then as I began to discover that, one of the things I learned was that I thought I was the one who was asking the questions, but it really became more and more clear that something else was asking the questions, and I was trying to find the answers. I was trying to find what it was that was asking. And then, so in a sense, it was like life was asking these questions, and I needed to experience the answers. That was like the way it turned around and changed. So I reached a point where I didn't think I needed answers anymore. I needed questions. The questions were really what's about. A lot of people talk about, okay, I have the answer. Here's the answer everybody's been looking for. But when you're asking about the questions, you're not even thinking about anything like that. You're thinking about something that's alive. That's not something you can put in stone or etch in rocks. It's something that's alive. And that's what was leading me on through all these lots of different stages where I thought I figured it out. And then next day realized, nope, I'm starting all over again, because there's a whole new aspect of this that I had missed. I hadn't learned yet. So through it all, the silent questions, the questions that come up deep within myself, they're the ones that really have been leading me on.
Well, you're stimulating a lot of questions in me right now to ask you, and that is, you spoke about just now about life was asking the questions, but what are the pieces or what are the components of life that make up the asking of the question, and the motivation for you to seek the answers. For me, I look at your statements about life, asking the questions, and it causes me to think about questions like, where's the intersection between personal choice and personal spiritual mission or personal spiritual exploration or goal, right? And where is it where it's divine intervention or divine inspiration, and then how much is actually coming from what I call the already enlightened or the already awakened future higher self. Or is it a combination of all of those things?
Yeah. I can tell you in the beginning, when I began, I wasn't aware so much of the higher self part. It became I became more aware of it over time. And then you breaking it down, could it be, some higher level beings that are also providing guidance, or is it something else that's going on that's even bigger than that? In the beginning, I could not distinguish between those, but over time, I began to distinguish. There was cases where I felt like I was provoking this. I knew, some part of me knew I needed to understand this. This is something I needed to know. And then there was other cases where something came out of the blue and it just like was beyond my awareness. I wasn't even aware of it, as a possibility. So then in case I say, okay, how could I be the one who's the source of this? There's someone else who's, or some other being or some other, states of consciousness that were beyond my awareness at the time. Over time, I become more and more aware that even when there's beings that I do meet and bring me information that's beyond my understanding, I am still involved in the process. And that what I've come to realize is that all of these things happen through relationships. So if I meet a being and we're communicating, we have a relationship with each other that's happening through. And then that changed my awareness about it. I used to think, okay, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. I can't claim credit for anything I do anymore, because I realize there's always all these other beings who are involved. And I can feel it. I can feel their assistance and help. And many times I feel like it's my job to help them. And that's, we're in this relationship. How can I help you? Because I didn't feel a need for it, but I felt there was a need for me to help them. So it varies, it changes. It's not one thing, and it continues to evolve and unfold in what I'm aware of.
So, a byproduct of the experience of searching for the questions and as well as the answers leads to an expansion of consciousness, and you talk about it as an expansion of soul awareness. I had an experience when I was 3 years old that really led to everything I've done in my life and led to this podcast and every path and every religion and every philosophy I've ever, investigated. And that was, I was 3 years old, and I know I was 3 years old because my younger sister had not been born yet. And I was sleeping in the bottom bunk of a two bunk bed. And I was awakened and I looked at the wall across from my bed. And 3 years old, you look at something unusual, the wall became a glowing golden light, this kind of oval doorway, kind of like the archway that's there in my background. A pure golden light, and this being, he was dressed in white, and he came through the doorway, through this archway of golden light, and I was just, I was frozen, And I'm watching this, and I was amazed that I wasn't afraid because the light grew brighter and brighter. It filled the room. It made me very warm and comfortable. But all of a sudden, I had this experience, which now I could describe it as a giant download of incredible love into my heart, and also an incredible amount of information and wisdom, and a sense of being immortal, being more than just a little 3-year-old body. It's just this incredible. It was an expansion of my reality. Now, I had grown up in a Catholic family, so my immediate, my brain processes it as, oh, this is an angel, right? And and I looked at him, and this love is filling me up, and I wanted more, and I wanted more information, and I had this sense that I want to be just like this being, right? Even 3 years old, and I hadn't accomplished anything, besides walking and being potty trained, and being able to play with toys. But I wanted to be like that being. And when the download was done, he began to recede back into the wall. And I got up out of the bed and I screamed, "Don't go, I want to go with you." And I ran and jumped at the portal of light, and I smashed right into the wall, got all bloody. And he looked down at me with a tremendous amount of love and compassion. And he said, "You cannot come with me right now because you have not earned your wings. But one day you will. Remember what you feel. Remember what you feel." And then he disappeared. I blacked out. But my entire life and all the experiences that happened to me after that, experiences when relatives died, and having dreams of them, and feeling as connected to them as I did when they were here on Earth, and that same sense of we are connected by this love, that has driven me my entire life, and to the point of I've searched and worked to try to, as much as possible, be like that. In the 80s, if you were a basketball fan, if you were a kid playing basketball, you wanted to be like Mike, Michael Jordan. Wanted to be like Mike. I wanted to be like this being, And so to me, that was an experience of expansion of soul awareness, because I became aware that I was not this, I was that, but I just hadn't grown into being able to express that. And then every experience I've had in my life has never gone the way I predicted, but it's always led me to the next step in that process, right? So can you talk a little bit about this expansion of consciousness that comes from working with the silent questions rather than needing to have a near-death experience, or out of the body experience, or a vivid dream, although all of those can be part of your expansion of soul awareness. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, sure. I think one of the things when we talk about spiritual experiences, we often come up with terms that we all know and are familiar with, such as out-of-body experiences, or some people talk about astral projection, or other kinds of experiences like this. People talk about, obviously people have been talking for thousands of years about angels visiting them, but the thing about those, when we talk about those things, we can get like a framework of how we're picturing what we're talking about. And that framework can also limit us, can limit what our actual experiences are. So you get kind of stuck in a way of seeing it, largely because you've heard about it more than you've experienced it. When you hear about it and you talk about it, it sort of forms a frame. And when you have real spiritual experiences, it tends to break those frames up. And that's where the expansion comes. You have to expand beyond your ideas of what these things mean. In all the cases, there isn't a single idea that you don't have to in some way break through or break beyond to really experience the spiritual side of those things. And so what is needed is not necessarily grand, great, mind-blowing spiritual experiences that were good for movies, you know, but even the smallest, littlest, most subtle spiritual experiences, those sorts of things are what really change us. The experiences we have change our life more than anything. Sometimes they're big, and so they're kind of mind blowing. You know, how could this be possible? But it's the small ones actually that I think make a bigger difference. And so when you're thinking about the smaller experiences, these are things that are actually happening day to day. And but if you don't know and look for them, you miss them. You might catch a moment where, oh, it was a good day. I don't know what it was about this day. It was good. I felt good. I felt at peace. Sometimes you have a moment where suddenly I felt like I understood everything was okay. Where did this understanding come from? I don't know. But those little kinds of subtle feelings are actually spiritual experiences of states of consciousness, and they can come and go very slowly. Don't let them go. When you have a moment when those experiences come, when it can be the smallest little thing, when you have them, hang on to that experience and go with the experience, and focus on the experience itself. Don't try and think about it, like what is this or what's happening now. Put that aside. Just the experience itself, because it's the experience itself that actually changes us in a deep, deep way. That's where the soul expansion comes from, is this idea, for example, this idea that you're not just projecting to another world. You're actually in some way expanding your whole awareness into a larger awareness. And that's a significant change. Here's another big change that I have experienced. Started off when I began, felt like I was a visitor to these inner worlds that I was experiencing. And I was going, wow, this is a different experience. This is much bigger than the physical world and that sort of thing. And so I would try and bring information back that I could write down in my notebooks. What could I record about this? How could I? But after a while, that changed. And I realized I was no longer just a visitor. I had become a citizen of those inner worlds. And that meant I was involved in the life of those inner worlds. And I suddenly realized this was and had always been a part of my life. I just had forgotten it. And sometimes you can see this with young kids before they grow up to not know what they're caught up in the spirit of it. They're caught in the spirit of the moment. They can start talking about things. Sometimes they're aware of having lived in a past life or things like this. And they just don't even think about this. They're just saying what they know, like they know anything else. But as we grow older, we build these frames, our understandings of things, and we close things off, and then those things stop. We stop having those experiences. So the biggest step for me was just learning to look for the smallest spiritual experiences in every moment. I remember once I made a task. I was going to write down, every day I was going to write down, okay, what was the most significant thing that happened today, spiritually, inwardly, to capture it. And I was surprised how much more there was every single day than I realized. I had to think about it before I realized there was a lot. It was happening all the time.
One of the chapters in your book, Silent Questions, tells a beautiful story called Visitation. And I was wondering, by the way, these stories you can download. I gave the links to download them on my Facebook post, but you can just go to Doug's website, spiritualdialogues.com, and I'll have a graphic on a PowerPoint in a little bit. But there is a beautiful chapter in there called The Visitation. Would you retell that story for the folks listening, because it was just so powerful for me?
Yeah, sure. I'll do a quick version of it. It's better
Yeah,
to
yeah,
read it. And I wrote it down shortly after I had the experience, so it was really fresh in my mind. And the experience happened oh, back in the 70s, 1970s. And I was basically, uh, nothing special was happening. It was kind of I was at home and suddenly I felt like I heard something, but then I realized I was hearing it inside. It was like a, a crying, like a young child crying. And I got up and looked out the window. It wasn't coming from outside. I then realized it was coming from within me. And I thought, well, what is this sound? Who is this? And I decided, by that time I knew how to learn how to go follow these kinds of inner calls. So I just went within myself and followed the call, where to take me back to the source. Who was it that was crying? And I immediately realized I was in another place, uh, and my body was back in my room, but I was someplace else, and I'm going along, and I see this White House, and play toys out in the front, dolls and things like this, and I can hear the child crying inside. So I go inside the house. I didn't have to open the door. I just was able to go right through the front door. And I felt very strange when that first happened, because I thought, should I be here? This is someone else's house, you know? And I felt a little bit concerned. I didn't want to invade anyone's privacy or that sort of thing. But then I realized when the child was crying again, I was there for a reason. So I went up the stairs and I turned and I looked in the room, and there was a young girl. And she was in bed crying her heart out. I mean, literally crying her heart out. Just whatever it was, I didn't know at the time, was devastating to her. And what as soon as I was hearing her cry out, in a sense, something within me, it pulled on me. You know, when you feel a need in someone else, and for her, it was a real need, and I felt it, and it pulled something through me. And as soon as that happened, that experience happened, she looked up and looked at the door where I was standing. And I looked around. I was wondering, was somebody else there? Because I didn't figure she could see me, but she was looking at me. And then I looked down, I could see my body was like a glowing light. And I thought she might have been seeing that, you know? And then she was intent on seeing me. And I sensed this from the need she had, what she was going through, not the details, but in general, what she was going through. And I told her, and the words came through me. It wasn't like I thought ahead about what I was going to say. The word just came through me. And I just said, you have Bunny, which was a little bunny toy and I don't know why I said the word bunny, but I said Bunny. You have Bunny. and you have me. And whenever you need, just call. And that was it. And then I started to fade away. And I went off. That was kind of the end of the experience. The interesting story is years later, I mean, many years later, I got somebody had read the story and she came up to me and said, I need to talk to you about this story. And I said, okay, I was interested to hear. And she said, I think that girl was me. And I was not expecting that. I was not expecting that at all. And so I said, okay, why did you think that? I was wondering if she was just feeling, it felt similar to something she had experienced, but it was like, it came as a knowingness. She said, yes, it fit. Her parents were in the process of getting divorced at the time. And so that's what it was just breaking her life up, but she also had this kind of inner knowingness. This was her experience. And I was shocked to hear her say that, So then she told me, she says, in the story you call my pet rabbit Bunny. She says, that's its real name. That's always been its real name. And she still had it. This is 30 years later, 30, 40 years later. She still had the Bunny, called him Bunny, always called him Bunny. It was because he provided that in the times of need, she would hold Bunny. That was had become that for her. So that was itself kind of remarkable. But that was just the beginning. So then the next thing I have to tell you is that I knew who this woman was that came up to me because my son had married her. She was my daughter-in-law, and we hadn't talked about this experience at all before. And it was when she asked to read one of my books, so I gave her that book. And when she got to that section, she read the chapter, and that's when she had this experience. And so here it was. I had had that experience with her, not in any way knowing that she'd end up growing up and marrying my son, but that's what happened. So you never know about. I thought it was just a great story to write down. You never know how it's really connected, how the beings we meet inwardly, and how this connection goes. It's really amazing.
Yeah, and part of those connections create relationships, which you talked about, inner relationships. And sometimes those inner relationships occur even before you meet the person. I often I did a workshop a couple of months ago about spiritual contracts, soul contracts that we have with other people to connect. And I had a similar experience to yours, but I was in an expanded state of consciousness in a contemplation, and I suddenly found myself in this house. It was very, very dark, and it sort of was kind of the typical horror movie haunted house, where you walk into the house and this isn't normal, and immediately fear came to me about being in this dark house, and then these glowing beings started to manifest, and kind of like those bodies of light that you were manifesting to, as the visitor. But instantly the fear was replaced by compassion, because they materialized to me as little children, and they were very sad. And so immediately my heart opened up, and my compassion, because some of them were very sad, some of them were crying, and my compassion overrode the fear. The love overrode the fear. So I began to talk to him, and I said, hi, who are you, and why are you so sad? And they said, we're children who died very, very young. And the reason we're sad is because our moms and dads and brothers and sisters are missing us, and they're hurting badly. And we've been trying to let them know that we're okay, and that life moves on, and we're happy and we're healthy. And would you help us? Would you help us help our parents to be able to, number one, understand that we're okay, but number two, heal their pain and their guilt? Because many of them are feeling responsible that they weren't good parents, and that's why we are no longer alive in your physical world. So my heart was just so filled, and tears were in my eyes, and I hugged them, and I said, I will do everything possible, and I have some things I can use, and I have some beings that can help me, but I'm going to trust that I will be guided to how to do this, because right now I don't know how I'm going to do this. I just know I'm going to do it. And sometime later, my brother-in-law, who lost a child and who got involved with some support groups for parents who lost children, and I had taught him some dream techniques that enabled him to connect back with his son in a dream. So he started an organization to help parents who lost children, and then was on a board of directors of a bigger organization. And so he invited me to come and start doing dream workshops to help parents who are grieving to be able to connect in their dreams. And so all of a sudden I'm doing these workshops, and these parents are there who lost children. And part of the workshops enabled them to be able to, in a meditative state, just send love to their child. And then we did a guided visualization to help them create a dream state with them. And they were able to connect. And the healing was, very, very powerful. It was instant. Their hearts opened up. And later on, we did a workshop on journaling using a technique where they wrote a letter to their child, and they flipped the piece of paper over and wrote a letter from their child back. And this was really incredible. And again, the whole time I'm feeling these kids, the souls of these kids. I could feel their presence and feel them kind of helping me understand what's the right thing to do. And I'm not talking about, a mediumship and seance and all of that. It was just we had made a connection. We had made a relationship out of a promise to help their parents. And so one particular person, she was a brand new mother. Her child was maybe 4 or 5 months old. And she had put the little girl in a swing. Those swings that, you crank up and it gone back and forth. And she hadn't slept in days, and she just said, look, I'm going to put her in the swing, and I'm going to just take a little 5-minute nap. Well, the 5-minute nap turned into 3 hours. When she woke up, the child had strangled itself on the swing. And she was devastated, of course. And she had carried that guilt that she was such a bad mother and a bad person to allow this to happen. So she came to the workshop and she wrote a letter to her child and said, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't, I couldn't stay awake. I'm so sorry I didn't save you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I feel so bad. And she flipped the piece of paper over and just started to write. And the child wrote, through her perspective, Dear Mommy, please don't be sad. And please, please, please don't blame yourself. Even though I lived a very short time, it was part of my agreement not to be here very long. But I experienced more love in the few months that I had you as my mommy than many souls experience in their entire life. Please know that I love you. Please know I'm always with you. And you can always connect with me by doing this exercise. And please know that you don't need to feel guilty anymore. And know that I love you. And the transformation in that mother was absolutely incredible. I'm sitting there astounded. But what was even more astounding was she came back a month later at another workshop, and there was another young mother who had lost her child because she had been feeding the child formula that was tainted with lead, had come from China, and the formula poisoned the child, and the child died. And she had that same anger and that same guilt. And when she heard the story from the mother who had received that letter from her child in the last month's workshop, she wrote her own letter, and she had a similar experience. You know, Mommy, we had an agreement. I would not stay long, but the reason that I did die is important because you need to help other mothers so their children don't die from the poison formula. And when she came out of that exercise, she was a woman on a mission. And she went on and started a nonprofit raising money to buy good formula for, folks who couldn't afford formula. And it spiraled into her recognizing and achieving her life's mission. And she's saved by now hundreds and hundreds of babies. So it was so incredible to see the connection, the connection from those children in the dark house, right, to the parents in the first workshops, to them then telling their stories to the other parents, and then these people turning around and recognizing they need to now serve because of the healing and the new relationship and understanding of life and immortality of soul. So I just wanted to share that to you because it really illustrated for me that expansion of soul awareness can open us up to recognizing not only our spiritual potential, but our spiritual mission and usefulness, and also our connection with other souls that we can serve.
And the experience that we go through by participating in those kinds of things, I mean, it's dramatic for the mothers or the people who have lost a child, and these other people who are experiencing this, but also for us. What we feel is like our life is just expanded. It's like our life is bigger than it was before that. There's a lot of times where I can remember thinking when I was younger, thinking that this is it. This is life, just my experience in the physical world. Isn't there something more to this? And that's when you feel those kinds of experiences, you do realize there's a lot more. And that's what I mean by being a citizen. You're actually involved in something beyond the physical. But it's directly related to the physical. I mean, the case of my daughter-in-law, interesting story. She when I turned that into a little booklet so people could download it and read the story, she read it with our son, her husband, and their two teenagers who are twins. They all read it, and And the teenage boy goes, "Mom, that was you?" And she goes, "Yeah, it was me." And that was a shock for the kids to see their mom in a whole new light. So these things have ripple effects. These kinds of experiences ripple out and touch people.
And you were talking earlier about when you begin at first to look to have these experiences, right? Because sometimes we start our spiritual journey or our personal growth journey, and we're looking for, how can I help me, right? Or how can I have this Hollywood experience, that I see in the movie? And we seek phenomena and we seek experiences, but in time, it begins to shift, as it did for me with, this story, to where we begin to look at what can I experience and learn from that will equip me to create more value, not just for me, but for life, for others, for the divine. And the focus becomes less on what's in it for me and how can I create value for others, rather than our relationship with the divine being like the divine is Santa Claus, and please give me the red bike, or please give me the this, or please give me that, to please help me serve you better. Please help me create more value for others. Please help me be able to express my gratitude for all that I've been given, and perhaps each day be able to recognize how blessed we all are, So that shift of me to we, us, is a very powerful shift.
Since we're talking about these kinds of experiences, there is a few groups of people who focus on inner experiences, but for a different purpose. And for example, there's something called remote viewing, which has been going on for 40, 50 years, at least that much. And actually, the US government was secretly funding some of this research in the early days. And they did it because they heard Russia was doing it. So if Russia was doing it, they needed to do it in case there was something to it. And then actually, they got a group of people together that, this was at Stanford Research Group when they were doing the research. And they brought these people in, and some of them turned out to be quite good at it. And they got lots of verification that they were getting real information. But what they were doing was focusing on trying to, in a sense, go through inner channels to get information that was physical information about other countries or, excuse me, about other. They might have to run a test. They'd send somebody out somewhere in the world. Nobody knew where it was except for that person. And they would then go there, and at a certain time, they'd be standing and looking at whatever they were looking at. And the remote viewer was supposed to then record what that person was experiencing at that time. And they would draw pictures or they would write impressions, and the results they got were remarkably accurate. It surprised everybody how much accuracy they had. So one of those groups of people that they formed another group, and they said, can we use this to understand the stock market? Can we go, for example, go into the future and see what the stock market's going to do? We could make a business out of this. This could become a business. So when they first started it, they were getting positive results. They were getting real results. But then over time, the results became less and less positive. And I was talking to somebody who's involved in this kind of work, and I said, yes, it's quite an easy thing. I understand what's going on there because when you first started, you were really, wow, this is possible. That's of value for everybody to know. These sorts of things are valuable. That's helping everyone. But then you're trying to turn it into a business where you're going to make profits over it. And then there's beings on the inner that start shutting it off because you're not helping the you're not helping others, you're just trying to use it. You're trying to go in, it's like you're trying to go to the inner world, find gold, bring it back and sell it. Right? You're trying to turn it into a business or something like this. And although you can find the gold, when you try to sell it, you then lose that ability. It just shuts off. You're not involved, you're not being a a citizen. You're being a visitor and stealing from the citizens. So it just really gets shut off. So there's this whole aspect that's going on, and it all reverses. If you're not just doing it to help others in this world, but also others in the inner world, like you would if you were a citizen there, then it just opens up and you find more and more experiences and you discover more and more of this. And some of the things you get involved with, you can't share with anybody because it really doesn't belong to this world. It belongs to something else. But your life is so much bigger. You're expanding your awareness of how much more there is to life.
Yeah, and in expanding that awareness, it's way more than just being separate from someplace else and then forcing yourself to travel to that someplace else for a experience and then come back and remain separate. What we're talking about is embracing the fact that we are connected to everywhere and we're connected to everyone. And through techniques, we can open ourselves to expand and embrace the reality that we are not only here, but we're also already there and everywhere else. We're omnipresent. And also we can embrace the past and affect the effect of the past on us. And we can embrace the future, not to change necessarily the future, but to change ourselves and create an opportunity for a better future for all involved. And that's that old saying that a rising tide lifts all boats. Each time we expand in our own consciousness, we are contributing to the expansion of consciousness for the entire universe because we're connected. And that gets into another one of your books, Lenses of Perception, and discussions on quantum. And folks can watch our previous interview with Doug, and we talk about a lot of that stuff. And go to spiritualdialogues.com and get that book. Besides The Silent Questions, I highly recommend getting that book, Lenses of Perception. With that, Doug, if you don't mind, I'd like to open it up for questions to both our Zoom audience and also our Facebook audience. For the Zoom audience, if you would, down at the bottom of Zoom, you have that opportunity to raise your golden hand by pressing the little heart, react, and just say raise the hand. For those of you on Facebook, if you can put your question in the comments, I will read the question to Doug. So with that, who would like to be the first to ask Doug their question? Boom, Paul, you were quickest to draw there.
Actually, I have two questions, quick.
Okay.
One, in the book, you mentioned Bill in the beginning. Did you ever hear from Bill anytime in the future? And the second one was the decision of making the chapters. There's a lot of things in each one. and they seem almost like a developmental shift.
Mhm.
So any meaning of the numbers of the chapters?
Yes, there is definitely.
Thank you.
As for Bill, first to answer your question there, I never did run into him or contact with him after I wrote the book, but at least not physically. I have had some inner contact
Oh,
that suggested I had a sense of where his life had gone and that sort of thing. I don't know if he's read the book or seen the book. I had lost. I tried to figure out a way to track him down, but I couldn't. Um, as for the chapters, yes, they do actually have a very significant thing, and I didn't make it overt, but as you read through, maybe it becomes clearer. But yeah, so like the whole first chapter was about my experiences that I had in my early life and in the very beginnings when I really got involved and intentionally involved in learning this stuff. And that to me represented what looking back, you can see the awareness I was gaining was always about spiritual things or other states of consciousness that give you more awareness about what's going on, but it was very closely related to the physical. The whole first chapter was like that. And then I experienced a change. And it came to me, and I use the word initiation, but I mean it in the terms of starting new, something new, initiating, and the word initiation can come to all kinds of ideas and things that don't get caught up in the old ideas of the word, but it really was a change in my life. And so chapter 2 begins when I started experiencing things more related to the world beyond the physical, the first world beyond the physical. And I began to realize I was literally a citizen in that world, and I had all new rules and laws to learn to be a citizen in that world. I mean, one of the experiences I had was I decided that there was this story I felt coming through from the inner, and that's when I discovered all good stories, like all the good fiction stories, they come from the astral plane where they're real. And if they're not real, they're not a good story. You can write the greatest story you think in your mind, but if they're not there real, then people get it. They don't feel it. They don't, it doesn't have that connection through. So that was quite interesting for me. And I wrote this story about something happened a long time ago. And I met this person I called Bird Friend, who was kind of responsible for birds and was conscious of the birds and leading the birds. And that after I wrote that story, literally after I wrote the story and he was down, I was still thinking about it. I went for a walk at a little park across the way from where I was living at the time, and I hear this caw, caw, caw. And I'm looking what's around. There's a bird in the trees. Caw, caw, caw. And then he flutters around and flies right next to me in a tree closest to me. I thought, what the heck? What the heck is going on? You know? So I looked into the eyes of the bird, and the only sense I got was the bird didn't know why it was doing it any more than I did. So I walked on, and there was a bunch of trees along the way in this park. As soon as I'm getting close to the next tree, they caw, caw. A bird comes and circles my head around and lands in the next tree. Literally, 5 or 6 trees. We're going like this. And then I said, okay, that was an amazing experience. I thought it had to be somehow related to what I wrote. What I wrote had some kind of an effect. What was that? So I went home. The next day I decided to go out there again. Here comes the bird. Just as soon as I walk out there, I hear the caw caw. It comes out again. This is like 3 days in a row. It happened, and I said, I got to tell Karen, my wife, about this. You just got to show her. This is unbelievable. So I told her. We came out there, and as soon as we got there, I heard this cawing, and it was way, way far. The bird was way, way far, and it comes flying all the way and landed right in the tree next to me. And as soon as it did it, I felt I had made a mistake. And the mistake was sharing this with someone else. This was personal experience was not intended to be shared. And that was like, okay, I learned the law in that world that some things are personal and they should be kept personal. And so that was it was really hurt. It felt in my heart. I felt it really deeply. Oh, I was really I'd let something or someone down. That's what it felt like. Anyway, so there you go. So then, of course, the book goes on in the third chapter, and that's representing the plane after the state of consciousness that goes beyond the astral world, and it goes all the way through to the end like that. So anyway, that gives you an idea.
Thank you. And thanks for your questions, Paul. And thank you, Doug, for that inspiring story. Virginia, do you have a question for Doug?
I do. Thank you. Yeah, Doug, I have this paranoia, I think it is, that I'm going to get in somebody else's space. And what would be your rule or law or to know that, like the little story you just told about you, that was a personal experience, but I'm similar to that. How would you know that you're crossing the line like this? The viewing thing you talked about, that sounds like the remote viewing, getting in somebody's space, but thank you.
Yeah. It's a really good question, and that kind of inner law you can break of getting in someone's space is very, very real. And you can't always know where someone else draws their line, But one of the things I have learned, and this it surprised me when I discovered it, and it came after years and years of writing things down, including my own experiences. At first, I would write them down, but not share them. And so this is, once again, some sense as, should I be sharing this or not? If this is my experience, maybe it should be private. And I certainly have kept most of my experiences private because for that reason, it was just for my experience. But one of the real discoveries I realized was that some of these things I had written down were not just for me. I felt it when I was writing it, but over time I began to test it. So I would share some of those stories. And indeed, a lot of people came up and said, that was meaningful to me. And they gave all their reasons for it. I could see it, like they got it. It was not just, that story was not just for me. So I began to realize that I had to be, when I began to share stories about myself or things about others, I always had to ask the question, is this of meaning to them? And I can't be doing because I think I should be doing. That's not enough. It's easy. You can, if you're not sure, you can always ask. What if there's, I would like to say something, but I don't know if it's something you'd be interested in hearing. But so I'm asking, or would you like me to say something? And we could shut it down anytime you want if you don't want to hear anymore. That's one way of asking a person before you get into their space about things. But the bigger thing about it is inwardly not getting into their space. And that's something you can always control. And that is, you don't want to ever be in their space. And the best way of doing that is whoever you're dealing with, have the utmost respect for them as soul. That wherever situation they're in is eventually soul's creation in some way or not, whether they're aware of it or not. But they have absolute respect for everybody, no matter how they are. Then you're never going to be in their space, because as soon as you're whatever, you won't be in their space because you respect their space. If you see what I mean. And that's when I realized that there was, even in the most difficult situations where it's really touchy what you say, it could go one way or the other really easily. That it's not always easy, but there's always the right words you can choose in any situation, how difficult you might think it is to express something. There are always the right words, but it's not always, you have to find them. And when you find them, you get, okay, this would be without any sense of getting in someone else's space. Now, I'll say with one other part of the getting in people's space that I have to say here, and that is when the biggest challenges, the reasons we often end up getting into other people's space without intending it even, or sometimes it is intentional, but is because we have not yet worked out our own issues within ourselves. And so that's one of the things I've learned over the years. I've learned is first I need to work out my part of how I'm reacting to this before I can offer any help to anyone else. And once I've worked that out, really totally resolved it to where I feel that I'm not bothered by this anymore, then I can share it. I can talk about it, and people will sense that I'm not doing this because I'm upset or I'm angry or that I'm trying to get back. That people sense that and they listen. I've noticed that. So those are some thoughts about space. Oh, the other thing that's really great about space is making space for others, and that's really a really good thing. That's the opposite of getting in people's space. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes the greatest things that we can say are silence. And holding that space in silence and really listening and really being present can speak volumes. But it allows the other individual, well, it allows two things. One, it allows the other individual to take their time and make their choices about what kind of experience they want to have. But holding that space in silence can also be holding that space sacredly for the divine to take that space. Mm. And that's always far more important than anything we could say or do, you know.
There's another story that I think everyone can relate to that describes the inner side of this a little more. I first noticed it when I was walking down the street and I was walking by someone with Down syndrome. And Down syndrome happens to be one of those things that has very visible look you can see and recognize by the look. But there's an inner side to Down syndrome, and I felt it. I felt this. It's a part of me that was feeling sorry for them, feeling a cringe of the experience of what they were going through. Down syndrome is really quite unique in terms of the people can be very functional people, but they have there's definitely a side effect to the experience, and yet it's very visible, but not in a necessarily offensive way. But it creates in many people a feeling of cringe. I don't want to have that experience. I know perhaps this past lives when we did have that experience that brings that reaction. But anyway, when I first was walking by this person, I felt it. I really felt this cringe within me, and I thought, well, I shouldn't have that feeling. I shouldn't be feeling a cringe. And as soon as I was feeling, I was like some part of me was having inner dialogue with them. I was, in a sense, working something out with them. And they were so used to it, people cringing, that reaction. They were so used to it that was nothing new. And there was nothing upsetting to them about that experience. And so then I realized, okay, then what I'm looking for is to be able to relate to them in that experience with them. And that brought about a positive response. And I was just this kind of it was going through my own thing. I was trying to find a way to work out my own cringing experience. How do I and I found it by this inner dialogue with the being. And his eyes lit up. Without we hadn't said a word, his eyes lit up. you know. And I think the lesson I learned from that is when I have an issue, if I can learn to resolve my issue, that helps others who are experiencing. Yeah. So,
Thank you, Doug.
yeah.
Anybody else have a question for Doug, either on our Zoom audience or in our Facebook audience? Yes, Nancy.
Hi, thank you. I love this. I'm on the edge of my seat. Uh, I can relate to so many things, so I'm getting lots of insights. I uh, I love animals, and I have a cat. And I got this cat about 2.5 years ago, a few years after my husband passed, and I'm going through my second thing with cancer. I'm doing really well, so all is good. And a number of months ago, before I knew all would be good, I was playing with this very brilliant, strong-minded kitty, and I heard this voice say to me from the beyond, "Would you like to know if it's possible to be happy even with a life-threatening illness?" And as I'm playing with my kitty, I'm like, "Well, yeah, I guess I would like to know if it's possible to be happy no matter what." And the way my cat started playing with me, I have never experienced so much love. So, no thought of an illness or anything on my part. I just said to my cat, I love you with all the love I know how to muster, and
Right.
I will always love you. And I have always loved you, and I will always love you. And no matter what happens to you, I want you to know that you are loved and you are soul, and I'm equal to you. I'm going on with all this stuff, right? So, and I'm realizing, oh, I'm really happy. This is great. So I'm going to work on that personally. Then I ask, well, what can I do for others? And so there's going to be maybe two parts, but the first part is how do I hold on to that?
Mhm.
And I think I'm about to answer part of my question without knowing it. What happened after that is people started calling me who were really hurting, advanced cancers, major problems. I didn't necessarily tell them about the experience with my kitty, Francois, but I did feel that feeling that I could love them and that they could be happy. And and I don't know how I knew this, but in some way, some place, somehow, they can be happy now, whether they know it or not. I didn't say that to them. I didn't
Mhm.
push that
Mhm.
on them. I
Mhm.
just held that intention in that space. And maybe you can help me figure out my question and my answer. But I think by doing this, the act of having this relationship with myself, with life, maybe my relationship with my cat in that moment could expand to all of life and all of living. And I kept saying to myself, I feel like someone turned the channel on my life. I am no longer in the same life.
Right.
And part of it was really wanting, without pushing it on people, without getting in their space. So I thank Virginia for that question. But how do I just keep holding that space and expanding that by more experiences?
Yeah. 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 So what interesting when you're telling the story that I hear is that, and it's the cat was a catalyst for what happened. The cat was a catalyst, and what's quite interesting about it is cats have an ability to heal people, and not just cats, dogs. Usually different kind in a different kind of healing that dogs will bring. Both of them actually in the inner, and I learned this accidentally going in inner, exploring inner places and stuff like this. There is a place where a world for cats, like that's their world. And the thing is, people are invited. Now, there's some animals like wild tigers. People are not invited. But domesticated animals, all of them have this invitation open for people to join their world. And one of the things that you go into the world of the cats, especially, you can see how much healing they do without saying a word. They'll come sit on your lap when people need it. And the recorded stories about these things are remarkable. There have been hospitals that have had a cat that would literally go on and sit on in the bed or lie in the bed, and people would know, okay, that person, this is like they got a healing effect from it. But in another case, it was a hospice situation. And whenever the cat was near them, they knew, okay, that they were going to die first. So it's like the cat was helping them cross over, was helping them getting ready to cross over. And you think, how do they do this? It's all unconscious for the cat. I mean, it just flows through them. They don't say a word, just like you're talking about, feeling that same way. I think you learned that from your cat. And you're wanting to share that experience with others. So you're kind of like a speaker for the cats, and you can recommend other ones to get a cat. Some people, try getting a cat, and it might open the door for them. But I think what you're sharing is the story that cats have an amazing ability that often goes unrecognized. So the world just got bigger from that discovery, right? Yeah. And sharing it,
Yes.
I think it's a great thing to do. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Our lives get bigger when we share things. Yeah. Especially, one of the exercises I've long done is having people think of the most difficult situation they're facing and the most difficult situation they're in. And now imagining all the beings in this world that are going through that experience and being with them and asking yourself, how can I help them? What could I say to them that could help in some way? And as soon as you find it opening up where you can, maybe just sitting with them, or sharing with them, like you're sharing with them so they're not alone with what they're going through. But as soon as you start to feel that, you start to find it helps you with your own experience of it. And that's it's like it always works. It doesn't matter how difficult the situation. I mean, I've been through some situations thinking, is there anybody out there that's had this experience? It seems so weird. It's a weird, strange experience. I think, but I was surprised at how many there were that were going through that same experience. I was surprised. And not knowing that you're not alone with that. You're sharing that experience with others. That changes it. It changes the story completely.
Yeah, and understanding that there is no experience that we are going through alone. And that in the process of going through the experience and having it expand you, having it inspire you, having it make you stronger, having it make you more compassionate, that you are actually passing on that growth to everyone who's having the same experience, because we're all connected. Mm-hmm. And recognizing that anything we go through, we're going through it not only for ourselves, but for all the beings that we are connected with, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, whether it's in the physical or the endless dimensions that we exist in. Anytime we take a step forward or inward that results in more wisdom, more love, or more freedom, we are bringing more wisdom, more love, and more freedom to everyone and everything. Mm-hmm. And that's a very comforting thing to know. Not only are you not alone, but there's a purpose for going through the challenging experiences that will not only benefit you, but will benefit others that we're never going to see them and know them. But, Doug, when we started this podcast, this Sunday interviews and workshops. It was during COVID, and it was sort of my gift, to folks who are going through COVID. And one of the things that we did often was we did an exercise where folks, in their contemplation or meditation or prayer, would find themselves in the hospitals with those folks who were in intensive care and their families could not visit them. And they were getting ready to end this incarnation. And as a gift of love, we had people in the group go and visit those places where no one could go, and be there and hold their hands and let them know they're not alone, let them know they're loved, let them know that they are divine. And we had some of the most amazing experiences of people in the group doing that. I know I did. And it really added to the richness of what people were getting from these meetings. And that's also the spirit of this podcast, is we meet together as a gift of love, not only to ourselves, but to others. And we always leave here carrying something greater and becoming something bigger than when we originally came here at the beginning of the podcast. So I wanted to pass that on, that story. And there are several folks here who were part of the original group 6 years ago. And for those of you who are here, thank you, for your love and support over these years. Masol, you have your hand up.
Yes, Michael and Doug, I wanted to first thank you for this meeting. And my question is, Doug, related to your initiations that you mentioned. When you were basically initiated and then you became a citizen of, let's say, second plane and then causal plane and then mental plane, etc., when you basically were going through this path, did you also notice some changes on the challenges that you had on the physical plane? So somehow are they cross-connected? So what basically can you basically describe about that experience? Yeah.
Yeah, I was shocked at how it changed. The changes in my physical life changed as well. I mean, it was like dramatic for me. I don't know about other people's experience, but for me, when I went through this change, it was like everything in my physical life changed at the same time. It wasn't just an inner thing at all, not even close. I mean, that story I told about the bird, writing it down, suddenly I'm experiencing in the real world. I'm experiencing a bird coming down to see me, and it was like that had changed my physical experiences. I remember moving from the causal plane into the mental plane, and I'm thinking, okay, I've heard lots of stories about this, and I felt this challenges going on, like you don't have a right to pass, you must stay here, this sort of thing. And I'm saying, well, sorry, I'm not listening to you. I'm passing because I want to pass, And then suddenly, every record of me in the educational system was gone. And I was trying to take night classes at the time. And they could not find any record. It was just, I had been wiped, wiped from the system. But that was just the beginning. I started feeling all these kind of like lords of these other worlds saying, you don't, we're going to be watching you. And at the time, I had the attitude where throw whatever you want at me. I'll take it. Go ahead. I don't care. And they did. They threw everything at me. All kinds of things were going wrong. It was one thing after another happened in the physical world that was happening. It was clearly having an effect on the physical world. And I had to gradually turn that thing around. I had to develop a sense of appreciation for the Lord of that world and realize there was also some positive things that he was bringing. And at least I didn't want to be in fight with him, you know. But anyway, those sorts of things. I remember thinking at the time that the old stories about the Greek gods, there was a lot more truth to them than people realized. Back then, people did think they had effects on the physical world. And I thought many times that it helped to actually look at it that way. Why am I facing this challenge? Why is this? It's like everything's against me right here. Why is it? Well, start imagining the gods are against you. And you're going to just shake your hands at the gods. I'll put up with it. I'll go through it, get through this. You know, actually, it lifted me. I felt better about it. I felt stronger about the experience going through that rather than feeling I'm the victim, you know. So it was a way of turning that around in a sense. But it did absolutely, each step had an effect on the physical life. All the worlds, you know, the inner worlds like that. They're so closely together, which just shows you how much of the inner life is a part of our outer life, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah, and it becomes useful to look at the challenges and be able to ask them, be able to communicate with our challenges, our illnesses, our relationships, our jobs, the things that, you know, become challenging, or beings in the inner worlds, and be able to ask them, what is it you have to teach me to help me become of greater value to life, to the divine? What, you know, it changes the whole experience sometimes of being a victim or being an adversary, to recognizing we are all connected and they have a purpose. You know, the ones who have caused us the greatest amount of pain, shame, blame, you know, all of those things were there as part of a contract with us at a specific time to help us grow, help us become more aware of ourselves and the laws that govern the way we live, and that there's something important there. When we change that to this is something happening to me, to this is something happening for me and with me, the whole experience can change. And I'm not saying that's everyone's experience. I've just found that if I take a beat and look at things, my wife is absolutely incredibly talented at this. You know, every time a job ended in my life, and it was like, why is this happening? Or every time a relationship didn't work out, why is this happening? She would always celebrate. Why are you celebrating? This job just ended. What are we going to do? Because I know she knew completely that wherever something ends, something new begins. Life always moves forward, and that if we accept the fact that there's always a gift and there's always something more for us in the next step, we can really change the effect of these experiences we're having. So I just wanted to share that there's an opportunity to communicate with experiences, challenges, and those who might stand in our way and say, it's all here for a reason, help me learn. What do you have to teach me?
I would just like to say, if there's anybody out there that has a question that maybe think goes beyond the limits of what you should be asking, feel free to ask it. They're often the most interesting questions. So.
Rich. Hey, Rich, welcome. Please unmute yourself. Okay. There you go.
Thank you. Hi, Doug.
Hi, Rich.
Earlier you said that when you were writing, if it was based on an experience that was real, then it really reached the readers and it made it real to them and they experienced it. But I'm wondering, some people see these experiences as really phenomenal and dream experiences too. So I'm wondering how do you parse the difference between imagination and real and what's happening in your dreams? How do those interact with each other?
So I've spent a lot of time over my lifetime leading classes on helping people develop inner experiences or becoming more aware of their inner experiences, that sort of thing. And it's almost the first thing that comes up. How do I know this experience is real experience? And for example, how do I know it's not my imagination? I'm just seeing what I expected to see or seeing what I wanted to see or that sort of thing. And so I usually do it by going through the experiences with them, having them share what they're experiencing with very simple exercises to begin with. For example, a very simple exercise I often begin with is imagine yourself sitting in your body, but you as soul move out the front of your body, you turn around and look, and what do you see? And I said, and so it's a very simple exercise. And a lot of people get caught up in the imagining part. I'm imagining I'm doing this and imagining I'm doing that. And in fact, I did this recently for a class, where some of the people are beginners in these sorts of things. And they weren't sure what they should be experiencing, but they tried to do the exercise. And then I say, so what happened that you did not expect? What happened when you did this that you were not expecting? And they all had something to say about that. I said, well, there you go. If you did not expect it to happen, if you weren't, then you couldn't have been imagining it was going to happen. It took you by surprise because it was something outside of your own imagination. Something more was going on. And there is a sign of something real in that experience. And this ties back. I first learned a lot of this when I was reading books by Paul Twitchell, who talked about what he called soul travel. And after I was trying to learn this on the inner, which was a long time ago, but I remember waking up one morning and Paul was sitting on my bed next to me. And one of the things he did was he reached down and there was a rock on the floor. He reached down and touched the rock like he was communicating to it. And I could feel that connection here with the rock and go, whoa, I hadn't ever thought about having an experience with a rock like that. Then he turned to me and says, there's a difference between imaginative travel and soul travel. And that was new to me. I had never heard anybody say anything like that. And so he was telling me there was a big difference. So I began to think, how do I understand that? How am I going to find out what that difference is? Because I really wanted to know how to do what we call, when we talk about soul travel, I'm talking about soul expansion to beyond this world and not just imaginative travel, which is what you get with some guided imagery. For example, it says, okay, now we're going to walk down this hallway, we're going to open this door, and there's going to be all this light. That's guided imagery. Well, what are you experiencing? Whatever you're imagining is what you tend to be experiencing. There's always, with guided imagery, there's often real experiences mixed in. But when you're focused on what you're not expecting, when you're focusing on what's unexpected and what's taking you by surprise, and then going with that and following that, then you realize it's taking you somewhere that you did not expect, beyond your expectations. And that's when you start to experience more of the real experiences. what Paul was talking about when he said there was a difference. Yeah. That if you have more questions about that, ask, feel free to ask. But yeah, that kind of in general get to what you're talking about, asking about?
Well, I had my own understanding of that, but I asked the question because I know you have much more expansive, ways of describing, the reality of it. And so I just wanted to hear, your insight.
Yeah, yeah. And did it get somewhat of the answer you're looking for, or was there something more?
Absolutely. Of course.
Okay, okay. Yeah. Yeah, and
Thank you.
the challenge, if I was just talking about with Karen, my wife, recently, that it's one of these things people have not been taught is how to recognize their own experiences. I mean, we go through schools, you can get any education you want, PhDs, whatever. They're not teaching you that. They're not teaching you how to distinguish real experiences from just imagination or just because we are influenced by suggestions. Somebody suggests something and it influences us. And if you go to the astral plane, what you see is somebody making a suggestion and it becomes real just by them suggesting it. And that becomes real for anybody who accepts that suggestion. And most of that happens unconsciously. We accept things and they become real for us. And we start adopting things without us knowing. Somebody else said it, somebody else suggested it. And we suddenly start having accumulation of these things without being aware of it. So what you have to learn on the astral plane is to challenge those suggestions, challenge your own imagination, focusing on the things that are beyond the imagination, focusing on the aspects that go outside of anything you said or anybody else said. In fact, focusing on things beyond our own awareness. How do we find our way in the dark when it's beyond our own awareness? And those are skills we can learn through experiences by trying things out. It's like you would do it in a physical world. If you were in a physical world and you were in a dark building, or just to say it's dark, you don't even know if you're in a building. How do you figure out where you are and how to figure it out? Well, you start feeling your way around, right? You start gradually getting to know it through experiences, little subtle experiences. Then maybe you say something out loud. Do I hear an echo? If I hear an echo, I'm inside a building. The senses tell you. And when it all comes together, that's when you say, now I understand where I am. Now I know where I'm going. Now I know what to do. And it's the same thing with inner experiences, finding our way by trial and error. And we gradually get from many different senses, not one experience, but from many different directions, from many different senses coming together. It takes on a sense of reality that's beyond just physical. Okay. Thank you for the question, Rich. Any other wild, crazy question?
Yeah, once again, folks who are with us on Facebook, if you have a question, write it in the comment and I will ask Doug about it. If not, any other questions here with Zoom, our Zoom audience? Gordon.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
You're speaking of the darkness and dreaming. I was going to share an experience I had a while back where I was above the earth and I could see how it could be a dream. Then all of a sudden, a friend of mine, Willis Crick, appeared and he said, I've got this here. It's an anchor point. I said, what? He says, it's an anchor point and I'm going to guarantee it. And he did. And then before me was a line, just like a magnetic line of force. and I stepped on it, and I was moving through the darkness. And what surprised me then is the darkness was alive. There was living things in the darkness moving all around me, but I wasn't scared. And it's going faster and faster and faster. And then finally there was a pop. And before me stood this man. His name was Rami Nuri. And he hugged me. And it was it was a great hug. And he whispered in my ear this word. He said, this is the perfect word. And he whispered to me. And just like a click, I was back. I was back home. And I thought, well, I can imagine being above the earth, but I could not imagine the rest of it.
Yeah.
And so pretty fantastic.
Yeah. So what you're describing is a series of things that happened that led you to knowing more and more about what was going on. You know,
Oh, yes.
starting off with being in the dark, literally.
Yes.
And then
But the surprise, the darkness being alive, I mean, and things moving in it, but then not being scared of it. I mean, and just my feet was like being on a tightrope, and I was like one foot in front of the other. I was sliding. I wasn't being propelled by a rocket. I was just sliding and going faster and faster. And of course, it's in space. I can imagine some type of space. There was no breeze, but yet the living things around me were all making themselves known by their movements. And but then when the light flashed, and it's sort of like a basketball stadium, basketball court, and the colors were red and black and sort of yellowish. But Rami Nuri was very recognizable by his appearance, pictures I've seen. But the hug was just, I mean, full of great love and compassion. And he said, "This is the perfect word," and he whispered it, and it was over.
Yeah.
So this stuff can be real, more real than the life down here seems at times.
Yeah. So you went into a world and you didn't know where you were, but it became clear over the experiences you had. It revealed itself. And none of it was stuff you imagined, you were expecting.
No.
And that's when you know it's real. That you know it's real when that happens. It's a real experience. Doesn't mean, it's physically this or physically that, or it's inner this or another. But it's a real experience, and the value is in the experience. Is the experience itself, like that hug.
Yep. That was tremendous.
Yeah, those experiences change us. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your comments.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Gordon. Wow.
I will say that your story reminds me of an experience I had. I directly related to the causal plane because it happened when I had moved into that chapter. And I was starting to experience things there. And one of them was this experience where I literally was in the dark, in a space, and I had no idea where I was. I saw lights out in the distance, and I thought, those could be stars, but I could be inside of an atom. I had no sense of how big anything was, how big I was, how far anything was away. And I only had this feeling like I wanted to know, where was I? What were those lights? So I started moving. I found I could just move. I could just start heading. So I headed towards the nearest light. And as I got closer and closer, I realized this is not a star. This is not a star at all. And then as I got closer and closer, I realized it was something much bigger, like a planet or something, But as I got closer and closer, really close to it, I realized it wasn't a planet. It was a complete world, a world of reality, all of its own, independent of any other world of reality. It was just, that's why they were scattered around. And I got closer and closer, and I thought I could step into this world. And I literally put my foot out and stepped into that world, and I was in that reality. And at the same moment I was in that reality, I realized I had been there for a while. So I had a history. I stepped into a history. It wasn't just, seeing some weird planet. I was a part of it. My life was there. People came up and said hi to me, like they recognized me. They knew me. That was a really different sort of experience. Really wild. So, and that it turns out on the causal plane, literally, you have worlds that are independent of each other, where the reality in each one is totally independent of all the others. They all come together under the one causal rules and laws, you might say. But still, the realities in each of the worlds are remarkably different. Yeah. So, anyway.
Yeah, it becomes a really interesting recognition that we are existing in many dimensions simultaneously, not just the one that our attention is in, but a multitude of unlimited possibilities. Some of you may have had the same experience of in the morning I put my keys on the dining room table and then went about taking care of some errands, and I needed my keys to the car, and I went to the dining room table. They weren't there. They were nowhere to be found. And so I looked around, couldn't find it, and just adjusted things and moved on. And a little while later, I went back into the dining room, and there were the keys. Now, I asked myself on the inner, did those keys disappear and then suddenly appear? Or was I in a different reality when I put the keys on the table? Was I in a different reality when I went and they were no longer on the table in that reality? And then later on, did I return to the reality where those keys were on the table? It's an interesting thing to ponder. And also, next time you lose your keys, ask or go within and ask to be shown, where am I? If I'm not in the place where those keys were, where am I? What is this dimension? Because we are multidimensional and multi-time track beings right here, right now. So, interesting stuff.
Yeah. And you can ask that question about, what's the reality of this? How do I look at the reality? You could ask it from a physical standpoint. You can ask it from an inner standpoint.
Yes.
And you get very different answers.
Yes.
You can ask it two different ways. And both can still be correct. But in all this, to me, the foundation is focusing on the experience itself. And that's where you get closest to the reality, is the experience. So when I was in that state of being in the dark, and then it was the experiences that left impression. It was the experiences. And whether you could say, okay, I was in the causal plane and all that, that's theory, but it's the experiences that really affected me and changed me. And only later on did they make more sense. And I could put the pieces together. And that's the better way. We're learning from the experience, not from thinking about it.
And also, by having experiences, we no longer rely on or are affected by beliefs. We're in a world right now where so much is happening because of beliefs which are ideas and ideologies from somewhere or someone else that we have accepted as a reality, versus if we can shift our attention away from what do we believe to what do we know, feel, and be through direct experience, it helps us become more connected to others and to life here and in other dimensions. And it reduces the ability for those who spin beliefs to have a controlling effect. Just like when you went to another place in the inner worlds and were told, well, you don't belong here, or this is it, there's no place higher than this, or I am the one and you must, kneel at my feet, and kiss my feet. Those are all beliefs that we can accept, or we can say, no, that's not my reality. Based on my experience, I know there's something more. I know I'm something more. So it's important to be aware and conscious of what comes from the reality of experience, what comes from the places in our heart, versus where are we, or how are we acting from what we've been told we should believe. Very, very important. I don't know if you have any comments on that, Doug, but to me it's real important.
It reminds me of a story, an experience I had. Karen, it was before we got married, but we were living in Las Vegas at the time, and they had a variety of casinos there. And one of the casinos had a lot of trapeze acts and things like that, but they also had a lobby where they had a lot of people selling their stuff. And we were walking along, and I stopped and looked, and there was this guy standing behind a booth, and he's saying, free pens, and these are the best, these are advanced technology pens. And that I saw what he was doing. When he was waving his hands, he wasn't just waving them normally. He was doing a hypnotic thing. And he knew what he was doing. And then I started seeing what he was saying to the people. He kept saying free pens, but they were not. They were like $18, $19 each, And I'm thinking, then I saw what he was doing. And I turned to Karen and I said, watch, look what he's doing, watch. And she going, and after I asked I said, what do you think? What do you think? She says, those pens look pretty good for free pens. I said, they're not free pens. Look, he's charged. She goes, oh, yeah, you're right. And then the guy looked at me, and he saw me, and he saw that I saw him, and I knew what he was doing, and he knew I knew what he was doing, and he got very nervous of what was going on. It was quite interesting, but the people were accepting it without any. There was no nudging inside of him going, this isn't right. How can this be free? It wasn't registering. He was getting them on the astral plane with his suggestions, and it was overwhelming them. They were just going along with it. So we are affected by those sorts of things all the time. And becoming more aware of it, we can actually turn that around. And we can use the imagination and the suggestions on the astral plane to create things that we choose to create, rather than things that are created for us. And that's how you begin to learn. That's how you learn, through the experience, by doing it and realizing, I'm doing this, I'm creating. I didn't even realize it. But that sort of thing.
We can move through stages. And I find myself often asking myself, which stage am I at when I'm having a particular experience? But we could move stages from being sheep, right, where we just follow blindly, and or we could become a sheep dog where we lead sheep in the direction that we've been told they need to go, or we can evolve to become the shepherd and determine what is the right direction for me and how can I help them find their right direction and not just lead them blindly, right? So that's important. From time to time, when we're following something because we feel we're supposed to, or we've been told we're supposed to, or and we're bombarded with that. Just like the guy with the pen, we're bombarded with it all the time about think this, believe this, do this. Stop for a moment and ask, or go within and look at it and say, is this really truth? And am I being the shepherd of my soul? Am I leading myself and others to greater wisdom, greater love, and greater freedom, especially spiritual freedom? If you can answer yes to all of those things and feel the reality of the direction you are getting inwardly, it contributes greatly to your expansion of consciousness and your value, to life. And you will be more and more the captain of your ship, and there's no time greater than right now for us to look at that, so I throw that out to you. Okay, one last chance for a question before it's time to let everyone go back to their lives, their homes, their evenings.
What you said, Michael, it reminds me of a cartoon by Gary Larson on the far side. And you see this whole group of sheep, right? In the middle, there's this one has taken off a fake head and it's a wolf underneath it. And he's looking around, he goes, what? Isn't there a real sheep in here? And then you now look and they all have little things around their head. They're all fake heads. Is there a single sheep in there? It was just wolves with sheep masks on. So I'm not sure why that reminded me, but
Well, no, I think that's great because we will come upon wolves in sheep's clothing,
yeah,
but we'll also come upon sheep in wolf's clothing.
yeah.
Both of those experiences are to learn from and to be aware of. Yeah, thanks for sharing that cartoon. It cracks me up.
Hard to get the image out of your head once you see it.
Okay, all right. Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, I want to bring up. Well, I can bring this up now. Let's go to that. Share that. There we go. So as I mentioned, please take advantage of the opportunity, if you haven't already, to go to Doug's website, spiritualdialogues.com. Right now, not only will you be able to take a look at all the amazing and wonderful books and articles, and there's incredible stuff. He has a whole library of past writings and responses from folks, and also you can get these free downloads on that site, spiritualdialogues.com. Definitely invite you to do that. I have thoroughly enjoyed and been incredibly been benefited from Doug and his books, and I'm grateful that he's willing to keep coming back on this show. You know, this show is sometimes a cross between Saturday Night Live's Wayne's World and the Dalai Lama. You know, somewhere in between. We move from the profane to the profound at times, but always it's always enlightening, and it's always incredible things to share. Paul, you had one more question?
Yes, sir. Based on what he said earlier about that technique for healing, that sounded like stuff from his Catalyst book. I was wondering if you're going to invite him to come talk to us about that book too.
Sounds like a plan. What do you think, Doug?
Sure. Yeah. There's
Cool.
some good stuff there. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get his whole library on here sooner or later. So, and speaking of that, well, speaking of the silent questions, let me just click on here. As I said, I have no financial interest with this podcast. It is a gift of love. I have no sponsors. I don't sell anything. What I would request is, if you are willing to, if you go to MikeDeLucaPodcast.com, and if you subscribe to the podcast, you'll be able to see, all 140 past episodes. Choose from there. You'll see the ones with Doug and many other great guests. It really helps me, the more people who subscribe and like the podcast. It enables more and more people to enjoy it. And what I'm going to do is the first 5 people who are not already subscribers, go there, MikeDeLucaPodcast.com, and subscribe. I will be giving you as a gift a free copy of Doug's book, The Silent Questions. So the first 5 people, if you are not already a subscriber, please do that. Go to MikeDeLucaPodcast.com and hit subscribe, and then hit like, and I'd love it if you'd share it with someone else, because it'll be of value to them. So if you haven't already done that, go ahead and do that. If you're already a subscriber, I'll find a way of rewarding you for that, for your long-term loyalty and love. So with that, we could go on forever, but I want to respect your time. Wow, it's 9:03 already. Doug, thank you so much for sticking with it and being with us again, and I hope you will come back. Thank you for all you do, for all you are. You are definitely part of our family, and we're grateful for that. Thank you all for being here tonight. I truly believe that every step each of us takes to expand our state of consciousness, expand our soul awareness, to create more value for life, for each other, it serves and uplifts the entire universe and beyond. So thank you for being you. Thank you for being here. I love you all. I am grateful for you all. Whether this is the first time you're here or the 100th time that you've joined us, you're so valuable to me. You're so valuable to the world. And hope to see you again in our next podcast. And we'll let you know on Facebook, and for folks who sign up on the podcast YouTube channel, you'll find out about it. So we have some great guests coming up. Another podcast next week and another one after that. Some great workshops coming up that I'm putting together that I'll be doing. Sometimes we do an interview, sometimes we do a workshop. It all depends on what I'm told inwardly is needed and what I need to do. This is as much for me because every show I'm researching and talking with incredible guests and learning. And the more I learn, the more I have to share, and the more I have to share, the more I want to learn and the more I want to share. So that's why we do this thing. So, Doug, thank you. Any closing comments before we end?
Thank you, Michael.
You're so welcome. All right, thank you all. Have a good night. Have a good week. Have a good life. And we will see you in our next episode. Take care of yourself. Take care of others around you. We'll see you next time.